Welcome to DeFi by Design, where we talk all things blockchain and cryptocurrency while striving to educate, empower, and enrich.
It's your boy Andy, and welcome back to the DeFi Slate YouTube channel. Smash the like button on this video, that really helps us out, and sit back and enjoy the content. Thank you very much.
Welcome back, DeFi Slate fam, to another episode of DeFi by Design. This is episode 81, and a lot of, frankly, chaos yesterday. We're on the tails of the Solana vulnerability in the wallets. There was a bridge hack. There was just all kinds of vulnerabilities exposed over the last 24 hours. So we're kind of gathering, collecting our thoughts here, and diving into the conversation around node infrastructure that Chainstack is delivering. So we'll touch a bit on what happened in the recent days, as well as the overall picture for the node infrastructure and how these blockchains are set up for success. We have Nick, Ethan, and Alan all from the Chainstack team. Ethan and Alan work closely with the protocols and advocate for some developer relations for Chainstack. And Nick is head of DeFi over at Chainstack. So I'm super stoked to talk to you guys and explore at a high level what Chainstack is doing and the impact on node infrastructure that it has at these different protocols, and dive deeper into what we're experiencing now and some of the unsolved problems that are resulting in these vulnerabilities, and how we can ultimately improve the ecosystem overall for the better. So it's a pleasure to have you guys on, and I'll pass it over to Nick and let him introduce himself. How you doing, Nick?
Doing great. Yeah, thanks, Robbie. Quite the last 24 hours, as you said. And I mean, not to change topics, we're obviously thrilled to be part of your podcast here, and big fans of DeFi Slate, what you guys are doing for the community. You guys are deeply connected. I think you're sharing to the masses, and I'm personally a fan, so glad to be on board. So I'll do a quick intro for myself. I'm Nick Saint-Chagrin. I'm the head of DeFi with Chainstack. We're a Singaporean-based company. We've been around since 2017. Really started picking up pace in late 2021. Team has doubled or tripled since the time that I've been here in my last 4 months. We're really picking up pace, during the bear market, as we can imagine. Clients are building, they're getting their heads down, they're preparing for the next bull run. And I think Chainstack's well set up to be able to support them going forward. So I'm out of Toronto, or just outside of Toronto in the East Coast of Canada. We work, obviously 24 hours a day across, 20 countries. Happy to support any clients and any customers that are interested in learning more about infrastructure. I'll pass it over to Ethan and Alan.
Sure, so I can get started, and then Alan can go after me. So my name is Ethan. I also go by Tabasco online. I cover Harmony and Solana for Chainstack. So essentially my job is to go out to these different protocols and the communities within these protocols and evangelize Chainstack and talk to people and understand what developers need, and kind of how we can support them with that. So yeah, the Solana hack has been really crazy the past couple of days. And of course, as the head of Solana for Chainstack, I've kind of been at the forefront of it, and there's a lot to unpack there. So I'm excited to be on here and kind of chat to you guys a little bit. So I'll hand it over to Alan.
Hey guys, so I'm Alan. I am a developer from Chainstack, and mainly I handle two protocols. I handle Starknet and Ethereum as a whole. And my job is go and talk to all the projects in this ecosystem and help them out with their needs, and also conduct AMAs and all these kind of things with these projects. So that's pretty much what I do at Chainstack.
So I think it would help the audience to paint an overall picture of node infrastructure as it relates to blockchain design, right? The general understanding, as I know it, is we have a blockchain that's an organization of nodes in a network, and this is typical of distributed ledger technologies and distributed systems across the board. These nodes organize themselves in a way to basically share information across the entire network of nodes, and from there, different packets of information can mean different things. In the Ethereum network and in essentially all blockchain networks, we have nodes that connect to each other, sharing kind of a collective pool of unconfirmed transactions. And each of these nodes have their own state of the blockchain, which is kind of this chronological order of the confirmed transactions. And a node will propose a new block of transactions to be confirmed and then share it with the rest of the nodes in the network to ultimately settle those transactions on the blockchain. So, correct me if I'm wrong, if that doesn't, seem like a clear picture. And could you explain how the node infrastructure can be organized in, different ways in order to improve kind of the scalability trilemma, or pick, certain spots on that? So, how does Chainstack look at a set of nodes and then make choices to improve either scalability, security, speed, cost, and some of those other blockchain parameters?
Sure, yeah. So I can kind of get started with that. I've written a couple threads on Twitter regarding kind of RPCs and how that fits into the blockchain. So you definitely got it right. RPCs and nodes specifically are kind of the fundamental layer of blockchains that work through transactions and kind of hold the blockchain. So what we do specifically in relation to nodes is that we provide RPCs. So RPCs are, I like to think of it as sort of the Ethernet cable from a user to a node. So essentially, when you're moving through the blockchain, you need some way to send your requests to the chain that you're connected to, right? So whether that's Harmony or Solana, you need some connection with that chain to push requests through. And specifically, you need a connection to a node, right? So typically, you'll have public infrastructure, which will be that connection to a couple different nodes. What we do specifically is we run enterprise-grade, high-performance private infrastructure. So infrastructure that connects you to a node that we run ourselves, and that's really designed for speed. So this is a node with super beefy components, and we essentially give builders and developers access to this node through an RPC, which is, like I said, that connection with the user and the blockchain. So they can access that node and they can build on it, and it really, it empowers these projects to build effectively and scale with public infrastructure and kind of, less private means of connecting to the blockchain. You have a big issue with scalability, right? So nodes that are designed to be servicing a high volume of people typically aren't going to be as reliable as something like Chainstack, which is designed to serve you and your project. So it's really great for scaling and kind of taking control of your project. And so, most projects, and I guess Nick and Alan probably have a good insight to this as well. Most projects will either use public infrastructure or run their own nodes. Smaller projects will use public infrastructure, which is good until you get to a certain point in which you're going to need to switch to something private, which in this case is going to be either using something like Chainstack or running it yourself. A big problem with running it yourself is that it's costly, and you need a developer team to run that, right? So you need a DevOps guy or someone to manage that node and ensure that it doesn't go down. What Chainstack does is it allows these projects and these developers to run nodes and utilize their project on a high power node without having to hire a DevOps person to manage that node for them. So it really allows these developers and these projects to innovate rather than focus on kind of the boring infrastructure stuff. So, yeah.
And before we dig into the maybe subtleties of nodes on different protocols, I had read an article, and I think it's fairly well understood that there is these connections in the traditional financial world between Wall Street and like Manhattan, where these trades are ultimately settled, and the hedge funds who are operating kind of around that hub, where they're actually running cables. And for high frequency trading firms, there is a latency between getting from submitting that order until it's actually received by the settlement engine and the trading clearinghouse. So I remember there was several articles. There was almost a race to get the closest possible to the clearinghouse to have the lowest latency when a hedge fund was submitting a trade. It reminds me of this Ethernet cable connectivity to the blockchain that you mentioned through RPCs. Is that a reasonable comparison to make?
yeah, I guess Ethan could hop in here, but just to give some thoughts, so that's a great example that you're putting out there. So the idea is, obviously, I think in the trading world, you need up to 8 connections: Japan, New York, London, Tokyo. There's probably about 8 of those in the traditional finance center. For blockchain, obviously, that's worldwide, it's global, but there's still kind of big hubs, right? So there's China, Tokyo, Japan, Midwest, East, West, Europe, those kinds of things. So what we try to do is try to decentralize that as much as possible, Robbie. So providers like ourselves will use a multiple of different cloud providers, and obviously different locations for those nodes across different infrastructure providers there. So let's say AWS, we have East and West, and then as they add new data centers, we can kind of add those to the stack. Virtuoso would be Frankfurt. We have GCP, Google Cloud in another region. So we're still building out that scale. I think we're adding DigitalOcean as well. So we'll have 5, 6, 7 different cloud providers. So we try to be as decentralized as possible and access to, like you're saying, specifically in DeFi, right? The latency, the speed, arbitrage, bot trading. People want to actually co-locate their bots as close to possible to the data centers. And similar to your example about Wall Street, is we've had people ask us, hey, can I actually, co-locate my bot right beside the data center to get that lowest latency? So we're always kind of working around those types of engagements. And I think scalability is big, right? So we can do a number of different things. We start with kind of on Ethan's journey there, from developer would use a public RPC endpoint. They're going to max that out pretty soon. Then they'd go to Chainstack and take a look at our Elastic node setup, which is kind of master node backs, load balance, etc. And then there's further options down the path of scalability for customization, like a dedicated gateway or something like a dedicated node, load balance, geographically located. So there's kind of a scale that you can work with providers like ourselves. Obviously, speed, latency, those kinds of things are very important. In GameFi, we've heard a big kind of resurgence there. NFT traders, sniping, specifically in DeFi, arbitrage. There's this whole concept. I'm not sure. I think I saw a podcast episode from you guys on MEV APIs. Flashbots relay. We use BlocksRoute for warp transactions. So we're doing a lot to really help that kind of speed and latency and block propagation. You nailed it right. The idea is the provider that's going to win, and then the bot that's going to win is going to be the closest, the lowest latency, and the best reliability, and that's what we try to provide.
Got it. What does maxing out an RPC look like? In a blockchain, I take it, you increase the gas, you can basically get your transaction kind of to the front of the queue. What does maxing out an RPC look like, and how does Chainstack introduce a new route for a trade so that it's got that lower latency?
Yes, I can kind of give you a quick rundown, and then I'm sure Nick knows. He's pretty good with kind of all the blocks right and the MEV API and stuff. So first of all, Chainstack really focuses on high performance nodes. So these nodes are designed to service super large scale enterprise projects like your DeFi kingdoms, like your Magic Edens, like these huge projects. It's designed to support those. It's designed to do this as fast as possible. So I actually did some testing with Chainstack against public endpoints, and in terms of latency and really reliability with your speed and your connection with Chainstack nodes, it really rivals most other public solutions. So it's really great for running these different things, and especially with our Elastic nodes. To give some context, we offer 2 types of nodes. So we offer Elastic and dedicated. Our Elastic nodes will be an endpoint that leads to our master node or a collection of master nodes, and this is going to be load balanced between a couple different nodes. So our Elastic nodes ensure that you can plug an endpoint into your project, and it'll be, like Nick mentioned earlier, load balanced throughout a couple different nodes. So this ensures that you don't, throw too much traffic to one specific node, and instead you can kind of have the fastest and most requests possible without any limitations, meaning that all of our nodes are actually not even rate limited. We have a super high request per second threshold, and all of this really adds up to be something that developers don't have to worry about ever reaching limitations of our nodes, because those limitations and that ceiling is super high with our Elastic node technology. And then for our dedicated nodes, these are going to be specific nodes that are dedicated to one project. So instead of Elastic nodes, which are a pointer to a number of master nodes, dedicated nodes will be one singular node that is ran specifically for this project. And that's good for a couple different use cases, and I'm sure Nick could probably get into the uses of that. That's kind of our rundown of the different node offerings that we have.
Cool. And I'm starting to think of the nodes as almost roll-up solutions in of themselves, where if you have an Elastic node, it's almost serving as that execution window, and we can kind of speed up the latency going into one specific node, so that when it's broadcasted to the rest of the network, it has the greatest speed, right? So by having a dedicated node, it's almost pointing directly to the node in the network. And I'm curious, Alan, if this is like an ETH2 staking node, if you guys have plans for that, and if a dedicated node is, you know, like a specific point for one project where they can send all of their transactions, and it's really only containerizing like the transactions from that one project. And then an Elastic node is almost like a roll-up, where, like, you know, you point it to one node and then it points to a master node, but it's got a quicker route to the settlement engine, which ultimately is the on-chain network, more so than just pointing to a public RPC, which is now collating all of these transactions and, you know, then putting them in the queue from there.
Yeah.
So how is this process on Ethereum now? And it, you know, do you guys have thoughts on any changes or adjustments to make for ETH2?
Yeah, I guess, Alan, I can help you out there as well.
Like
Go
I
ahead.
can come. Yeah. So like mainly like I would say like Ethereum right now, like the node structure wouldn't change much. The only thing is that like when you have an ETH node, like, and like when you're running it as a dedicated node, you will get like better privacy and security. Then I could like go on to like add one more point regarding it. Then I would say like the sovereignty, it would be like much better than compared to, you know, a Elastic node. But then, like, you know, running it for a completely like dedicated node on your own can give you like full custody of the digital asset, like, because like you are not literally like sharing it with any other person. So at the same time, you can have the fully control of the private key with your address. Then you now have like, you know, choice to you know, fully have a copy of it on your own. And it's like when you are doing it with the same case Elastic node, like what would happen with that, like you are literally like connecting to a node which are like shared within like multiple users, and this could ultimately like there isn't like much of a problem with that, like, but then like if you are someone like who's like very deeply into, you know, vulnerability and security issues and everything like that, then it could be a problem, because obviously like having a dedicated node could like fully like give you full control of it. And at the same time, Elastic node, like people who are like really, you know, very much worried about like security, they wouldn't really consider it as an option.
Yeah, so to add on what Alan was saying there, so right now what we do is RPCs, we're considering validator nodes, specifically with ETH2, Robbie. That's something that's very interesting for many, you know, working on the Beacon chain. So we're actually in talks right now with a few different partners, and we're actually considering launching our own set of validator nodes. So what we do today is we support something called the Pocket Network. That was kind of our first foray into the validator node setup. It's been quite successful. Obviously, you know, Pocket Network is up and down, but what they're doing is really neat, and it gives us a chance to kind of test that thesis. So you'll see a lot more coming out of us in the next few weeks and months around ETH2, obviously with the September merge date, put it out. And then what kind of Alan was saying, so, you know, in terms of the dedicated node versus the Elastic node, a lot of people come into this, Robbie, with this thought that they need a dedicated node. They want that security level. Our CTO, Eugene, would say, look, you know, Elastic nodes are load balanced. They're built to be supported. They're built behind these super big master nodes, beefy as heck. That's going to be probably the first step. And then when somebody wants something even further on customization, like what Alan was saying, number one is, you know, you have this a bit more feeling of security, of dedication. It's my own node. But usually we recommend kind of load balancing 2 of those and then geographically distributing them. So, you know, the cost can go up. It's a lot based on requests. So just diving into a bit of the pricing plan with Chainstack, right? So we charge based on requests like many other node providers. And then with the dedicated node, you're actually just paying for compute and storage. So you have unlimited requests. So for projects that are really big and scaling, they don't want to have any of these kind of ups and downs in terms of costs per month based on requests going up and down or hitting peaks. So you can do a dedicated node in that case. And then further down that path is once we launch this validator node setup, then you can say, hey, great, I want to go and stake, let's say, you know, 80 to 100 rocket pools or 800 validator nodes. And then we kind of adjust the costs, and those would each be dedicated nodes. So that's kind of, I think, where your question was going with ETH 2.0.
Yeah, that does help. And you mentioned Pocket Network, which we've done a podcast, and Michael over there is super cool. He's on top of it as well. And they're bringing an element of decentralization to this, ultimately this tech stack that's built on elements of centralization with AWS and other providers, and bringing a decentralized element to it. Could you talk a bit about that partnership and kind of how Pocket Network and Chainstack complement one another?
Yeah, absolutely. So I do the Pocket Network with Chainstack as well, and so we're very close to the team in Florida, and big fans of what they're doing. Obviously, the token price is getting crunched right now, but we're all in strong belief that it's going to turn back around. So what we do with Pocket is we actually support them through a number of engagements where we'll actually support some of their Pocket node runners with our chain relays. So let's say somebody in the Pocket Network was infrastructure costs are high, right? So especially with the bear market, we've had a few of them say, look, I actually was running thousands of Pocket nodes or, the chain relay nodes, and I actually just don't want to do that anymore. The cost, the ROI isn't there. So we would help them with their chain relay nodes at scale, and then they can offload that and then run their own Pocket nodes. We also offer Pocket nodes themselves as a service, and we kind of help a lot of the network that way. And in terms of decentralization, you kind of nailed there. So a lot of clients come to us and say, look, can I, run Chainstack nodes and then decentralize that and offer that to clients? And we're kind of thinking about how that works. Our CTO would say, look, we've got multiple cloud providers. We're across the geographies. We're already kind of in a decentralized space there, but people want to take it one step further. So we have a lot of conversations with the different clients around, taking this one step further down that decentralization path and allowing them to run Chainstack nodes for our client base, those kinds of things. So there are discussions there. I think with the Pocket Network, the big thing is, the token economics, what the business model is looking like and how they can kind of recover from kind of this bear market, right? And right now the economics are really tight on node running, where, the validator nodes, the rewards that you're getting on a day-to-day basis are a little tight based on the price of the Pocket Network. This thing, as was, over a couple of bucks. Now it's under, I think, 0.08 cents or, 8 cents, right? So it makes things a little tricky. And that's where a provider like ourselves can say, look, we operate these nodes at scale. We're pretty low cost. We're effective. You can offload a lot of that infrastructure cost to us and focus on kind of what you do best on the front end of things. So it's neat. There's a lot more to come from it. And like I said, we're big fans of the Pocket Network as well. So happy to have future conversations on that.
Yeah. They're really in tune with the security model. I know Michael has explored a lot of concepts dating back to early blockchain design and distributed ledger technologies, and kind of built from the ground up to eliminate some of the weaker points of the tech stack when we think of Web 1 plus Web 2 plus Web 3, and building from the deepest part of the stack up. And it's great to hear that Chainstack and Pocket Network can relate the node infrastructure where Pocket Network has these nodes, but then Chainstack is able to integrate them with one another and pull them all together into the most scalable and like you said, cost-effective way. That's awesome. So now getting to I guess the more recent times, right? So we talked about the recent hacks, the one on Nomad Bridge, Solana. How does a dedicated node or an elastic node help protect against these kind of exploits? Is it even possible to protect against these kinds of exploits? And I know we're still kind of digging through the details in these vulnerabilities. Is there a measure of security to take with Chainstack and kind of having dedicated nodes where Chainstack is able to provide, like you said, a private process and a private endpoint for these projects, and they wouldn't come under this type of they wouldn't come under fall in these vulnerabilities? I know Solana was a private key hack. The Nomad Bridge, we're still kind of digging through the details there. How does Chainstack, with I guess the dedicated nodes and even the elastic nodes, provide this kind of sideload element of security at the node level, and kind of help protect against any of these node level vulnerabilities?
Sure, yeah. So I'm sure Alan and Nick probably have a good insight into specifically our nodes in relation to security. But first of all, That's a great question. The Solana hack recently was an interesting hack, and it was a rare one in that the basis of the hack was a private key leak. So the specifics of how that happened are not super known at the moment. But ultimately, at some point, a list or a database of private keys got leaked. So in that case, an attacker can take control of those wallets and send funds from them and drain them effectively. So with wallets, anybody who has access to a private key is effectively the owner of the wallet, right? So whether you created the wallet or you didn't, if you have the private key, now you have full control of that wallet. So in Solana's case, somebody got access to a bunch of private keys and then took ownership of that wallet and sent it to the attacker's wallet and stole that money that way. So it's an interesting case. And in that case, Chainstack probably wouldn't be able to help much. And that's kind of like, that's outside of the node territory and more into database security and like keygen library security. Yeah, dedicated nodes and elastic nodes definitely are going to be more reliable and more secure than something public. And Alan and Nick might have a better insight into the specifics of that.
Yeah, I guess.
Maybe I can comment on it. Sure. So like when you are like using your own public nodes, you are like 100% at the risk of being vulnerable to it. So it's like when you're having it running everything on your own, you are obviously like allowed to have the private key like within yourself. And the risk that could come up with this would be the fact that when you have it within yourself and it's public, obviously you have to like take care of it. At the same time, like you are at the scene of like you should store it in a certain place which is your responsibility. So like if it gets leaked, your entire nodes, everything will get vulnerable. So like if you're using an RPC provider like us, we have like an enterprise grade like security which would allow you to like fully secure it for you. At the same time, we have our own backup service and we can literally help you like recover everything within your own. And like if you're doing it like on your own, this could take a lot of money, a lot of engineering power, and like just running your node on your own it could cost like up to $86,000 like dollars per year, which is like a lot. So like the best thing would be to just make an RPC provider like Chainstack to run it for you, and like we will like 100% take care of all security measures for you. Maybe Nick can add on to it.
Absolutely. I mean, I think, Robbie, some of the recent events, it's tough to say whether Chainstack could have helped or not. I know we speak with a lot of providers and marketplace vendors that do, auditing and analysis and sort of, private key recovery, kind of social engineering, those kinds of things. So I think some of our partners may be able to help in this case. We work with clients that, this is their bread and butter, right? Whether they're insurance providers, whether they're kind of, auditing firms, those kinds of things. So we'll see. The next, I guess, probably 48 hours is usually when this stuff gets flushed out to see who's going to kind of take responsibility, what happens there. But back to Alan's point, what he was saying is when you're running an RPC endpoint publicly, you're kind of solely responsible for everything that goes on there versus running a provider like us. We kind of give you that peace of mind, right? So you have node authentication, you have, 2FA controls to get access to the platform. You can have multiple users, user management. So it's really kind of bringing an enterprise grade application around a node. And I guess, back to the cost savings measures of it is, instead of a team of 2, 3, 4 guys that are running, obviously nodes is not their 100% daytime, but I think we did some math and you could get up to 100 or 250K depending on what a developer engineer kind of costs per year versus a couple $100 a month depending on where you're at for plans with Chainstack. So we'd love to kind of catch up in the next few weeks and see how all this unfolds. But a lot of the partners that we work with in the marketplace can actually help clients like these kind of fix these situations or get ahead of it, whether it's auditing smart contracts, taking a look at new wallet technologies. There's a lot coming, and I think we're in touch with a lot of the folks there. So I guess Ethan's going to be on the hook for the next few weeks to see how this whole Solana thing plays out.
You're muted. Sorry.
It looks like you're muted.
Yeah, it is too early to tell really on the depth of the most recent vulnerabilities. I'm curious on like the common misconceptions that users have when it comes to control over their own wallets. Even I think there's really simple security measures to take, like not putting your private key into a website. It's just one of the most basic ones, and could have prevented probably a large portion of these Solana hacks if it was a database that was vulnerable and stored these private keys. And then there's some other simple security measures. And Alan, you mentioned how running a dedicated node gives you full control over your wallet and your private key, and I think you mentioned full control over that digital asset that you're moving back and forth on the chain. Could you unpack that a little bit? Like, why does running a dedicated node give you more control over your digital assets?
Okay, so get to know that better, you need to understand why when you're running a fully node on your own, and you need to understand why you should be using an RPC node to run it on your own. So when you are running a node on your own within your PC, the problem would be the fact that you are essentially contributing more to the distributed control and contributing more to decentralization. But at the same time, when in the case of ETH nodes, when you are running it on your own, you will get full control of it. At the same time, you will get full control of the digital asset. And when you are using an RPC provider like us, and there are two kind of nodes we provide, that is the elastic node and dedicated node. Elastic node essentially shared node, you will be sharing with other providers, other people will be using it. And for the basic information, for any security person, they would know that sharing something, sharing a node within another person, that is a common practice of vulnerability. And when you're doing it in the same field dedicated node, you are essentially the only person who is using it. And this could it's pure logic, pure logic to basically think about it, because dedicated node, you are having 100% control of whatever transaction, whatever blocks, everything that gets rendered onto it. And at the same time, when it comes to elastic node, 2 to 3 people are accessing the nodes at the same time. This could at the same right now, there isn't any any research or anything that would actually say that running an elastic node or running a dedicated node, which one could be better. But at the same time, if you're thinking it from security perspective, dedicated node could be essentially better. But then like I said, running an elastic node has its own common practices. Yeah.
Got it. Yeah, the dedicated node you're not sharing with anyone else. Elastic node you're only sharing with the few that roll up into that master node, and then a public node you're sharing with kind of the entire population. And when submitting transactions to these public nodes, it seemingly gets clogged and congested if there's so many users that are sending transactions through that node. The kind of the idea of sharing that node, right? Sharing that throughput, I understand could reduce kind of the scalability measures. And going and submitting transactions, is there a possibility where someone could submit a malicious transaction into the same node that I might be sharing and submitting fine transactions, and that's one of the reasons not to share a node? Or is it mostly in scalability terms, not so much in security terms, to run a dedicated
I guess
node?
maybe I can take. Go ahead, Ethan.
Yeah. So sure. Nick, I'm sure you have. I'll let you talk after this. So with public stuff, security wise, they're going to be pretty safe, generally speaking. So if you're going onto a public node and Harmony, for example, which is a network that has historically not been great with their public nodes, security wise, you're going to be fine. But the big problem with public RPCs is that that scalability factor that you mentioned. So specifically with Harmony, which is the other protocol that I do on top of Solana, congestion, like you mentioned, and the lack of scalability is a huge issue. So you go into this protocol and it's hard to load websites, or it's hard to get transactions through because, like you said, you're sharing this node with the entire protocol. And because of that, it's really easy to get it congested, or for arbitration to kind of clog the network and whatnot. So really with these I like to call them personal RPCs, or these personal nodes, whether it be elastic or dedicated, you really don't have to, of course you don't have to share the network with anybody else. It's your node. So you unlock an entirely new a platform of scalability that you don't have with public infrastructure. And like you said, this really allows both users and projects to fully utilize the protocol that they're on, whether that be Harmony or Solana, without having to worry about that kind of shared factor and having to fight with the network to utilize it properly.
Yeah, I was going to say, Robbie, there's also some neat things that we're adding. So I'm not sure, I know MEV API, and MEV is a big deal when it comes to this. I know I've been reading a lot to see how MEV is going to impact ETH 2.0. So minor extractable value or maximal extractable value, that's something that's happening as we speak, all over the world. I think they were talking about $600 million in the last year has been kind of, drained by this type of solution, right? So what MEV does is allows them to kind of either do sandwich attacks or front running or back running and really, kind of, I think take it, I don't know how you want to put it, it's kind of a maybe not political, but kind of your ethos here, whether you're taking advantage of people in that kind of a case, right? Profiteering is one thing, but, for the general average user that doesn't know, and, they were about to pay $1,500 for ETH and now they're stuck paying $1,505 and somebody made some money out of it, it may not seem like a big deal, but at the end of the day it is. So there's a few things that, kind of Chainstack at least is doing with our partners. So we like to talk about, the MEV API, we're actually enabling people to take advantage of that. But, the way that MEV is going with the flash bots is they want to actually kind of almost segregate that and allow that to take place in maybe a little bit less of an abusive way. And then there's other things called the warp transaction setup, which is really neat. That's with our partner called Bloxroute. I think you've spoken with Yuri a few times. And what they do is amazing, right? So we actually have built in with this new Chainstack 3.0, the integration with Bloxroute. We call it warp transactions. And you can essentially, enable a node to have warp transactions on it. So that can be done both on Elastic and dedicated. And what will happen, I think it's on ETH, BSC, and Polygon. And you can actually, propagate a transaction much quicker and faster through the Bloxroute delivery network. So there are things that we can do with some of our partners on top of the node setup to really help you get your transactions through. And we include a number of free transactions with Bloxroute. There is some value to signing up with their platform, but at least with Chainstack within our UI, you don't actually have to have a subscription. You can set up Bloxroute warp transactions right out of the gate. So it's kind of this constant battle between, I guess the bots, sniping kind of folks, the arbitrage players, and then kind of the traditional sort of middleman and the small players like the retail componentry. And so like Ethan was saying is, people usually start as developers on kind of the public RPC endpoints, when they're doing testnet, that kind of stuff. Then once they get a test bed of clients, they kind of do some geographical testing worldwide. And then when they actually launch to go public, at that point, they're going to want to set a load balance, probably elastic sets of nodes in the different geographies to cover Tokyo, Japan, and East and West. And then, further on the path, once they start getting into some big volume, that's where they kind of decide, okay, is it worth going to dedicated node? So it's less about the security practices. It's more, we, at least at Chainstack, have a vault platform that integrates, that makes sure that your stuff is secured on both Elastic and dedicated nodes. But to Alan's point is dedicated is, my own endpoint. There's no other transactions on this. It's only my project's endpoint. And ideally, if you're load balancing that and you're scaling up the GPU and resources, you can actually get a pretty super powerful node for yourself. So, consider Chainstack as quite the custom shop. We do have out of the box platform, but in terms of, working with projects that are going through their scale across networks and different kind of use cases, we can help them grow through that path.
Yeah, it is a common misconception where, just bumping the gas up is gonna submit that transaction and get it through faster. But as you guys are saying, there's a few stops along the way for a transaction to go from clicking a button in the wallet ultimately to settling on the chain. It hits these various endpoints, first the node, and then kind of so on and so forth from there on different nodes, and then broadcasting to the entire node network. Where speeding up this transaction, and I'm curious more on warp transactions, where how this path is ultimately sped up, whether it's from decreasing the amount of endpoints that a transaction is hitting along the way, or if it's actually increasing the speed, but then lowering the latency and increasing the speed of that transaction through the series of endpoints.
Honestly, it's kind of looking at the Bloxroute side of things, right? So the way, and I don't want to speak for Bloxroute here, but the way they've set this up, and I was just watching a video yesterday from Yuri, is, they have a geographically distributed network that's been up and running for many years that is high performance, high focused on just speed and latency. That's all they do, is to make sure that their nodes through this distribution network are going to be kind of ahead of the curve. So they spend a lot of money on infrastructure. They have some big clients, and he's saying, clients spending 50, 60K a month with them just to be able to get this kind of stuff up and running. And so it's really using that specific custom delivery network beyond just Chainstack's kind of nodes that really helps you get that speed up and running. And there's a whole kind of science behind it. And I know, Yuri did a PhD on this, but, it's when you get closer to when that block's about to close, there's a bit of a window, and they allow you to get into that window. And that's what kind of helps your transaction gets pushed through, because what will happen is you get into this concept of like gas wars. So, if your transaction goes through and you're going to say, I'm going to spike the gas on this, well, the bot reader on the other side can say, great, I'll spike it a little bit, I'll come in and front run you and I'll sandwich you at the end of it, and they'll still make money on it. And you still feel like, oh, I've burned some extra way on the gas and my transaction went through, but it wasn't optimized. So I think that's where kind of the blocks route, concept comes in. And, we do a lot of work with them, and we're very happy to get it up and running. And, I think there's been a lot of success recently with some of our clients on board with the Warp transactions. And it's a combination of kind of the speed, but it's really using their delivery network that helps.
Sweet. Yeah. Yuri's a gigabrain over there, and that's super cool that the node network again is able to complement with some of the different protocols out there that speed, scalability, increase kind of the throughput on the user side, without kind of increasing the block size or anything like that. It's actually utilizing the block for its greatest power. It's able to kind of like build the transactions in a way that's more efficient than just simply kind of like rudimentary, putting transactions in there with various amounts of gas. It's kind of optimizing, as you said. So cool. Now switching gears here over to Starknet and some of the newer protocols that are coming out. Alan, like what are you most excited about over there? What are you seeing on the ground? Across kind of like the developer relations that you have in the space. What's new and exciting coming out of Starknet?
Like I would say, the thing about Starknet is that it's like pretty new. So like mainly like all the projects that are developing and like getting onboarded with Starknet, they are like very much focused on the ZK like rollups. And then I would say that like the main language in Starknet would be Cairo. And like only hardcore coders would actually take the effort to learn that and code in that. So we already know that like people who are like developing projects on Starknet, they are like pretty much serious about like Starknet and how much like it can like blow up. So like I would say all the projects that are still developing, like I would say there are like 60 projects that are on developing over there, and like 8 of them are on mainnet right now. And like out of the 8 of the project, like or many of them are like wallets. So these wallets are like slowly developing like much further and further, and people are like getting to use it more and more. So like essentially what could happen in the future could be that these projects that are already developing on it, they could like scale up much more, and essentially like these small protocols like Starknet, they could like replace and like compete with like huge protocols. And a lot of developers over there would grab onto Starknet.
Yeah, just to add,
in a way.
Robbie, sorry, I'm going to cut you off. But yeah, so Starknet, we're quite excited. And the reason why, obviously a lot of people are excited about ZK Rollup, but, the cool thing is it's such a new protocol that we have a chance to kind of take the leadership route here. And we were the first provider to be able to offer nodes on Starknet. And what we were seeing is a lot of the ecosystems, they start with a good, strong wallet background. So we're speaking with kind of the main wallets in Starknet. And what Alan was saying is a lot of them are on kind of testnet, mainnet, sort of kind of, cooking up. So you're going to see in the next, I guess, couple of weeks or months here how things develop and the DApps actually get on board the Starknet platform. But what's really cool to see is that at the bottom level is it always starts with kind of a wallet infrastructure. And so we're speaking with kind of the main wallet providers there and, getting on board and working with them because that really sets the foundation for the infrastructure, and the whole network can kind of build on top of that. So we're quite big fans of Starknet. We're talking ZK Sync, StarkX, all those kinds of things that we're working with. So it's going to be a big project for us. Alan's kind of, taking the lead there, and he's made his way through most of the different projects on the platform. And we're just making sure that they know that, Chainstack's there and ready to support them.
Solid. Yeah, I'm stoked for Starknet. Obviously, mainnet alpha is out there now, and they're kind of holding the majority of the ecosystem, the entire space, kind of at arm's length before opening the floodgates and allowing everyone to rush into the system to prove out the resiliency of their network. And is there a difference on, from Chainstack's perspective on these different validator mechanisms, like, ZK rollups and ZK proofs, differing from Arbitrum and Optimism and other optimistic types of solutions? Does the validator mechanism have anything to do with how the node infrastructure is built?
Yeah, I guess I would venture to guess. So just to note that we are going to support Arbitrum and Optimism very soon. So it's kind of, we'll have access to the whole camp of them, but you're totally right. So we use something called StarkNet Pathfinder, which is kind of the software library for StarkNet today. Some others are using Core, JS, those kinds of things. So as these kind of, like you talk about the consensus mechanism, they each have their own kind of flavor of it. And obviously, kind of behind the scenes, is the software that powers that is a bit different per protocol. And even within a protocol, you can have a different version of it. So it maybe a little tricky to kind of dive into just on this call, but we're very positive that this is going to revolutionize the way that consensus is done in the future. And it's something that we're going to support. How to support it, you'd have to have a chat with the development and engineering teams on our side to see how they're actually doing it behind the scenes. But they definitely each have their own flavor. And, I guess it's not really our position to kind of tell the market which is the better way or the other way. We're sort of agnostic in the middle, saying, look, at the end of the day, you're going to need an RPC provider for them. And then we'll kind of work to support those out of the gates. And then, the community will choose which one's the leader and which one's the winner at the end of the day, right?
Yeah, I'm excited for these ZK chains. Ultimately leveraging Ethereum's security model, similar to how optimistic rollups are as well, but without the dispute period and the consensus mechanism of providing the proof right with the transaction, rather than optimistically saying, kind of waiting for that disputer to come in and dispute the transaction if it's malicious. It seems extra bandwidth to always be looking at the chain, scanning for any malicious transactions, and then flagging that as a bad transaction and going to the dispute period. Providing the proof right along with the transaction seems to speed up the efficiency with it and just kind of tap into this relatively undiscovered kind of mathematics that allows the proof to send right with the transaction, rather than rely on an external provider to judiciously kind of look at the chain and flag the transactions that should be disputed. So yeah, I'm particularly excited about StarkNet and the ZK proof system overall. And yeah, it kind of brings up a question in my mind of the differences between validators and nodes. I think generally they're almost considered like within the same family. Like, if a set of validators, all talking to one another and broadcasting transactions to one another constitutes a chain, or if there's a more basic infrastructure at play here where it's like these nodes, and then certain nodes are validators, or validators are, could you speak to that a little bit? Like how nodes and validators, are they one and the same, or are there different kind of segments of nodes, some of which are validators, some of which are like these other types of nodes?
Sure, yeah. So I'll give Alan and Nick a chance to answer this as well, because it's kind of a multifaceted question here. But yeah, so generally there's a couple different types of nodes. With Harmony specifically, which is the main protocol that I do, you have validator nodes and you have explorer nodes. So explorer nodes are going to be nodes that you use to push requests, grab data, and the kind of general surface level things. Validator nodes are separate in that these are going to be nodes that are designed and specified by usually one person or group of people to exclusively validate transactions within the network. And a lot of time these validator nodes also have RPCs. They run alongside that. But validator nodes are special in that they're elected by the network, specifically by a proof of stake network like Harmony, to validate and to receive delegations. So for example, on Harmony, you can go into a list of validator nodes, and these are all nodes that have been elected to be validator nodes throughout the network. And you can delegate your currency to that, and that is a dedicated validator node that you are staking to. That's going to be separate from our Explorer, like the less validation-specific nodes. that you might run for RPCs. These are a little bit more lightweight, and they don't require consensus and election to work within the protocol.
Usually comes with stake, right, Robbie? So that's kind of the big difference is when you're talking about, you have your skin in the game when you're validating, right? You could have a potential of losing the stake and getting slashed or, getting jailed, those kinds of things. So it comes with a certain level of responsibility. You have to have the funds to be able to do this, right? With ETH, for example, it's 32 ETH. I mean, it's not, everybody out of the street that has the 32 ETH to go and validate and stake. So it's a neat component, and I guess you're going to see a huge transition to that. And people have already started working towards Beacon. You've got Lido, you've got a bunch of other companies that are already offering ETH 2.0 services. It'll be really interesting to see how institutions transition. Even myself personally, I was kind of concerned about staking ETH just because there's no real guaranteed, window out. I don't know how you've done it or if you've been involved at all, but, you kind of have this risk as a user of, is this thing going to happen, this merge? Is it not? Most people in the space think it is, and they're pretty confident, right? But it does take a certain level of responsibility. And like Ethan was saying is, it's kind of election, it's consensus, it's maybe one scale up in terms of level of responsibility. In terms of the hardware requirements, I actually believe, after speaking with the CTO, is they're actually pretty lightweight in terms of what is actually needed to manage them. And so it's not like they're kind of a different flavor of node, but they're essentially one and the same, just with a different set of privileges and permissions and requirements.
Maybe I can add on to it regarding the case of Ethereum. So in Ethereum, maybe you could run two nodes. One of them is a validator node. The other one is a node you actually use, develop on Ethereum. So in the case of validator, like Nick said, you could stake much onto it. So validator node are essentially, they used to, actually take part in the mechanism that's happening in Ethereum. And in the case of Ethereum, like Nick said, you have to stake the two ETH to actually, take part. And there is no guarantee the merge is going to happen or it's actually going to take place. They already have been talking about the merge since 2019, and there hasn't been any much progress. But then now that there's a date, we could actually say it's going to actually happen. Then validator nodes are mainly you could say you could have power in the consent mechanism, so you can take part in it. And the other type of node is mainly used to develop or application, decentralized application, and just dabble with the demos.
That kind of unveils a new endpoint for transactions that flow through. It's first the transaction is created in your wallet when the smart contract function is called, and it goes to this explorer node, which picks it up and sends it to a validator. And then the validator, if it's in a ZK system, it'll construct that proof before sending it to the settlement engine. If it's optimistic, it'll just kind of relay it over to the settlement engine. I think that paints a really clear picture of kind of the life cycle of a transaction, right? From getting created in a wallet through the different sets of nodes, ultimately to selling on the chain. That really, I think, paints a clear picture here of the different kind of endpoints and the path that a transaction takes and how it can be sped up with different levels of scalability and security with dedicated nodes, elastic nodes, running ETH2 nodes, ultimately with validators, and kind of making this route to settlement a much more cohesive and efficient system overall, with the different levels of security and gas optimization with Pocket Network and Blockthroughout and some of the other partners. So as we kind of wrap up here, I'm actually curious, is there unanswered questions that you guys have, and if you have a dedicated research team, maybe they're exploring some of these questions, what are some of the mysteries that are still prevalent in the space that you guys at Chainstack are looking to solve kind of on the forefront of this node infrastructure concept?
Yeah, I would say, sorry, Ethan, I was going to call out the content team, right? So we've got a few kind of experts, Antonio and Ake, Evgeny, and, you guys can catch them on Twitter. And we've got a whole, they've doubled or tripled the content team, but, they're always out there kind of, putting out tutorials, I think, new languages, those kinds of things that they're trying to figure out. There's also a whole set of APIs, right? Kind of, we're trying to figure out what's the future. Is it just node running? Is it bringing APIs, developer tools, those kinds of things? So I think that's kind of the focus is for them, and happy to introduce them to anybody that's interested. They've got Twitter handles. They're putting out content and blogs and tutorials. And, we're also big on the community, right? So if anybody has any questions that they'd like us to try to answer, feel free to shoot them their way and we'll jump in on that. I don't know if Ethan, you had another comment.
Yeah, so in terms of like research and finding these unanswered questions, we're always Chainstack. We're very centered around innovating and ensuring that we have the most modern solutions for whatever problems arise. Right. So like we just introduced like warp transaction and MEV APIs, which solves an entire subset of problems that typically most node providers don't solve. So ultimately, our goal is to kind of, as blockchain continues to expand and develop, and of course more problems and things need to be accounted for and provided kind of start to be developed. We always want to be at the forefront of that and kind of giving developers the tools and the answers that they need to innovate and kind of get where they need to be. So, we're always releasing new things, whether it be new protocols or new features. And all these things are things that, like Nick said at the beginning, our team of 80 people are always working really hard to find exactly what we need to do to service developers in the most effective and, of course, the most modernized way possible.
Maybe I can add on something more about Chainstack. We have like our own patented technology called Bolt, where we allow like syncing the node like within like 6 minutes. So like if you're doing it like without our technology, it would take up to like more than 1 week, which could like waste a lot of time for any developer. So our technology, like the Bolt technology, we make sure it takes snapshots of the ledger. So like whenever you are starting to deploy a node with us, you don't have to like start from the Genesis block. You can like start from the snapshot that we created, and we like regularly update it at the same time. So this could literally like save a lot of time compared to like other like doing it yourself. Yeah.
Definitely. I have personal experience with this. Back when you had to run a node to create an Ethereum wallet, I mean, I think it took like weeks of my computer being on and like fan going burr, right, and overheating for me to download the entire chain in order to set up the node just to hold ETH in my wallet. So yeah, that is a problem. I've experienced, and now that's kind of solved on the wallet front, but still on setting up the node front. Taking a snapshot and then just kind of building on that snapshot rather than downloading from scratch is certainly a time saver. Cool, very cool, yeah. And my last question is when we ask all the podcast guests if just in one sentence or so, if you are stuck in an elevator and you had to give an elevator pitch to like one person, dead or alive on Chainstack, who would it be and why? As far as like just 1 minute elevator pitch on someone.
Yeah, I guess I could take a swing at that one. If I was stuck in an elevator, I guess we're always after kind of the chief technology officer in those cases, right? We'd say, look, you want to be able to sleep at night, right? You've got a family, you've got things that you care about. Why not try to offload a lot of the things that are not core to your business, like node management, right? You guys have developers, engineers that are brilliant. They're targeting the new problems that the communities need to solve. They're building UI experiences, user experiences, communities, and managing nodes. Having an outage in the middle of the night, taking those teams away from that. That's just that's old days. And there are vendors like ourselves that can help. And it really is just our CTO would say just have a good night's rest, knowing that your nodes are kept well and they're safe and they're up and running, right?
Very cool. Ethan, Alan, if you guys were stuck in an elevator, who are you explaining distributed ledger tech to and this whole web of nodes?
Yeah, definitely. I agree with Nick. Sorry, Alan, I didn't mean to start. I agree with what Nick said. He's definitely right in that. I think that what I would say is that these nodes are really high performance, and with me specifically, I focus on like latency and like the scalability factor. Like the purely technical stuff is super impressive. So any project leader or somebody in that elevator that kind of knows what I'm talking about, I'd say I generally say a high performance node provider that works across a ton of protocols. Right now, I think we're up to about 14 protocols. That allows you to really scale your project, and like Nick said, not really have to worry about node management yourself. So that would be kind of what I'd focus on.
Cool. Alan,
So,
in particular?
Like I'm a developer, so I believe like I should be like talking to one of the developer who actually develops technology at the same time who would actually understand the financial money it would actually take to run it. So I think like talking number would be the best thing to do, because like literally running a node on your own would actually take like more than like 86,000 a year to like maintain it. At the same time, it could cost like extra 5,000 for the cloud services each month. Then it could take like more than 5,000 to get a set of people to work on it. So like talking numbers, and maybe making sure like they'll understand like why they should be like doing it with us, and like how they can like do it better. At the same time, like they can have like better service. That would be like one of the main point to like consider while elevating it.
Cool. Yeah. We've heard the likes of Elon Musk and Zuckerberg, and it's cool. Like you guys are really tapped into the technology space and the data architecture of how these blockchains are constructed. And really, any CTO, that's a valuable conversation to have, and it would probably make their elevator ride a much more productive one. So, thank you for coming on the podcast. It was an absolute pleasure. And our audience can find you on Twitter.
I would say all three, right? I mean, we've got Chainstack.com website, we've got the Twitter, we've got the Discord, we've got the Telegram channel. Each of the developer advocates, Ethan and Alan, are involved with the community. You heard about Ethan Tabasco. Alan, your handle, if you want to share that out there.
My handle in Twitter would be like Alan Joseph AJ itself. Like I already shared it, and like you guys can hit me up over there, and you can find me like me and Ethan, like all of us are like very active in Discord. Like so, like putting a message over there, like we'll just reply back in like within like half an hour or within an hour while we are awake.
Awesome, guys. Absolute pleasure.
Thanks, Robbie. Keep it up.
No problem. It's great to be here. Thanks for having us.